Oh, hello, everybody, and thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you for being here. As you can see here, I've got a scene from my area of the world where I'm from. This is near the Grand Canyon area near Flagstaff, Arizona, in the United States. And I may be very, very far from home today, but I definitely feel at home among colleagues, and I hope you do as well. So I am here to talk to you about what is a very controversial issue among educators, especially engaged educators of the sort that we have here today. And that is the role of memory and the value of memorized knowledge in a world where information is available absolutely everywhere and where thinking is the most important skill that any person can have. And I have a unique perspective on this, as you'll see in a little bit, and I hope that what I share with you today will also perhaps spark some shifts in your own perspective as well. So I come to this question from my background as a cognitive psychologist and as a memory researcher myself. And I'm one who also now today who's always incredibly excited to share what my field has turned up over the years through all of our research, including some very surprising and sometimes very practical findings about how memory works. And in particular today as well, we've turned up some powerful connections between memory and knowledge and the ability to be a skilled and discerning thinker. And so that's why I think it is really important to focus on this topic today. That and the need to send our students out prepared into their future careers and also into a world which absolutely is becoming more complex, challenging, and even chaotic with every single passing day, it seems. And so we're going to be exploring some connections today among those things, and also looking at how memory itself may be evolving alongside technology with some implications that are both positive and negative for learning. So at the end of our time together today, I hope that you'll come away with a new appreciation and understanding of how this sometimes maligned and sometimes neglected aspect of learning actually works, with some ideas for how to carry this out for the benefit of your own students in your own environments. All right, so with that short introduction, here's the thing. When I talk to educators, such as yourself, about memory, when I first started going out and sharing the findings of my field, there were some themes that I got as pushback. So there are some reactions that tend to be typical. And now that I've had the opportunity to talk to hundreds and hundreds of educators and ask them, when I say the words, I want my students to remember certain things as a function of my course, or I want them to actually memorize this piece of information, what comes to mind? And these actually may be some things that are coming to your minds as well as I'm talking here today. So here's just four that tend to rise to the surface that I'll share initially. So the first reaction I tend to get, the topic of memory, is, well, Professor, don't you know that everything is available online? So, of course, that theme of, well, why remember anything when it's all available through a search engine? Everybody has a phone on them all the time, right? And now, of course, with the arrival of generative AI as an even more powerful tool to find anything that you might need to know at any time. All right, so there's that one. There's also variations on this theme, one that goes back to Bloom's taxonomy. So I have up here on the screen just one of many illustrations that you might see of this framework. Now, I love Bloom's taxonomy. It is an incredibly powerful conceptual tool for guiding and planning what we do. However, it is a hierarchy, right? And quite naturally, we look at it and we say, I don't want to be stuck at the bottom of this hierarchy in the remembering phase of learning. I want to be up at creating, evaluating, and analyzing. That's where my students really need to be successful. And then there's this one. If you think back to, for example, Paulo Freire's powerful idea of the banking model of learning, right? This is another that tends to come to mind when we think memory and knowledge as a core of learning. We say, well, that idea was that educators are up here, we have all the knowledge, students are down here, and learning and teaching is just a matter of shifting what's in my head to your head, right? Or what you might call today, with a more technological metaphor, the download theory of teaching and learning. So that's not what we want. That's quite repellent to most of us as educators. And then there's this one, like, well, yeah, sure, knowledge is part of what we want our students to develop, but I can't spend my whole semester or my whole year on this, and I'm envisioning that my class is going to be this, frankly, very boring slog of just drilling and remembering and memorizing and stating things over and over. That's not what we want. Okay, so that's what I hear when I bring this up. And here's the first thing that I always want to emphasize, which is, this is all coming from a good place. If any of those themes, or all of them, or even more objections come to your mind when I bring up this topic, that is the hallmark of somebody who has thought very deeply about the nature and purpose of teaching and learning. So that's all really, really good. But there are some perspectives, and perhaps even some new emerging research you may not be aware of, that I'd like to share as well. So here's the thing. As a very practical person myself, I just kind of envision that, well, after my students have gone through my course, what do I want? I want them to be out in their careers, or maybe in the next course, a more demanding course, advanced course, actually applying what they've learned from me, right? And in order to do that, and to do it in a very fluid, skillful fashion, can they really be diving for their phones every time they need to know some key piece of information? That's not going to work very well. I think, for example, of my students in my research methods courses, right, learning statistical analysis and so on, there are certain statistical parameters and cutoffs and so on that we use in that field. And you can look any of those up anytime, and you're going to get the same exact information from your phone, from your book, you name it. But when they're in the laboratory, and they're going through all that output that the computer just gave them, and they're having to make their decisions and make their analysis, it's going to slow them down. They have to stop every time to go and look that key piece of information up. And every time they do, that drives up the cognitive load that they're under. And I say, how are they going to go out into the field and become these skilled researchers if they don't have certain pieces of information? Now, this doesn't mean go home and memorize the whole statistics textbook, right? But it does mean that I, as the expert in this field, can help identify for them, okay, here's the stuff that you actually are going to use all the time, day in and day out, that you do need to know without going for your phone. It's what we'd call it, American English, back-of-the-hand knowledge. So name any field, any academic field of study, any career, there's back-of-the-hand knowledge that we know that students are going to need. And there's also this exciting new emerging research that shows that, unlike what I was taught when as a teacher, that that thinking skills and memory are not necessarily in competition. I was told, well, you can have higher order thinking skills, or you can have memorized knowledge. You can't have both. But now we know that one complements the other. So I think, for example, of this line of research that shows that when students have more firmly committed to memory, those certain key back-of-the-hand knowledge facts about a field, they are more able to do things like draw inferences or make predictions about what will come next. And that's what I would consider higher order or even more creative thought. So one can complement the other. They're not in competition. That's what the new research is suggesting. And this can also be true for critical thinking, creating a sort of a virtuous cycle. So one topic, not to get too political here, but one big topic in my country right now is the application of our United States Constitution and the Bill of Rights, the key provisions that come right at the beginning of that document. And I think about how I want my students to be able to think critically about that, right? And I think of a debate that we might have in my classroom, talking about the interpretation of that incredibly important document and those rights. Well, that debate is going to go very differently if everybody who's in the debate has an idea of what those provisions actually are. So I stand with many experts who say critical thinking is great, but students have to have something to think critically about. And so that virtuous cycle that can happen when students are thinking deeply about a set of topics, but also have those key facts committed to memory, that's powerful. So many experts have also observed that when we do grapple with material in an effortful way, that actually drives memory more firmly into our knowledge base. And then the more we know, the better we can think about it. I love this statement from one of the experts in our field, Daniel Willingham, the educational psychologist. He says, memory is the residue of thought. So think about how powerful that can be in your own classroom. Memory, the residue of thought. Deep thought, reinforcing memory, reinforcing deep thought. And here's the thing. Because in my field, we have been studying now for 50, 60 years, the key functions of how memory works. We know so much now about how to accelerate it that nobody needs to spend their whole semester just establishing those key facts. With some core principles of how memory works, this can happen quickly, efficiently, and not be a chore for your students. So that's what we're going to pivot to now. So instead of sharing tons of technical theories or jargon or things like that, what I like to do is try to boil this down, all these decades of memory research, into just the most core principles and the most useful things that teachers can use in their teaching and share with their students for their studying. So for purposes of this talk today, I've called this the 5 Noble Truths of Memory. So I'm going to share these with you now. So it all starts with your concept of what memory even is, right? And I like to start here partly because, unfortunately, in my field, we've also, I think, set up some metaphors of what memory even is that are kind of counterproductive. So these may be reminiscent. If you've had some psychology courses, you may recognize some of these. So it's easy to think about memory just as sort of a container. It's like a filing cabinet that your mind has, and that's where you put information. Or it's like an assembly line. Information comes in through eyes and ears, and it stops along the way. It's short-term memory, goes into long-term memory, and comes back. And nothing could be farther from the truth, according to today's memory theories. And memory is definitely not like a video camera. It's not like holding up your phone, and it just takes in indiscriminately everything that's in front of it. Human memory is much, much more selective, right? We don't just commit something to memory because it's in front of us or because we've heard it many times. We take in what is relevant to our goals. So memory is something the mind does to accomplish its goals. It's not a place that the mind has. And once you make that key shift, a lot of things start to become a lot more clear about why we remember some things and forget others. And it's also really important for teachers to remember, because it's easy for any of us to say, well, if a student is having trouble grappling with a particular concept, they don't seem to be able to pick it up, they just need a bigger container, right? But in fact, there's probably something a lot more subtle going on. So memory is not something the mind does, or it's something the mind does, not a place the mind has. So here's another big principle we can all use, which is that memory thrives on effort and engagement. So here's that residue of thought theme again. And this ties into another really core principle, which is the connection to attention and focus. So the decades of memory research has shown us that for all practical purposes, if we don't pay attention to something in a focused way, we're not going to retain it. We retain virtually nothing that doesn't go through attention first. So when we put effort, we put active engagement into something, memory blossoms. And when we're unfocused, it disappears. And out of all the different ways to effortfully engage with information, far and away, the most efficient from a memory standpoint is retrieving. So this gets to that principle of retrieval practice, something that has been a tremendously dominant concept in the field of applied memory for years and years now. So retrieval practice simply references the process of pulling something out of memory, right, without looking at an external aid or something like that. And this can be a test, of course, and be a quiz, but it can also be explaining a concept to your study partner, right, or asking each other questions. And especially, retrieval practice pays off in better retention compared to what many students, they make a good faith effort, but what they'll do when they say they're studying is simply reviewing a textbook, right? So they've got the highlighter out, they're reading. They will retain much less from spending time on that than they will from closing the book and saying, what did I just read, right? So retrieval practice, powerful, powerful form of active engagement that results in incredibly accelerated memory retention. And there's also the role of timing, the so-called distributed practice principle. So here's the thing. Let's say that I have a student who's engaged in the classic cram session. We've got a test on Monday, so I'm going to spend hours and hours on a Sunday going over that information. Well, when you have that kind of concentrated time, the information gets tied to that particular context. And you get less out of that same amount of time spent studying than you would if you simply split it up over shorter sessions spread over more time. And this is partly because, we all like to take breaks and we don't get as overwhelmed. But it also has to do with some processes that actually go on in the brain having to do with context. So when we continually study information in one context, quite naturally, it gets bound up to that context. But when we study it across many contexts, we talk about it with that study partner, we encounter it in class, we encounter it in a different course, in a different setting, that helps trigger the brain to bring that information up more readily next time. So distributing the time across shorter study sessions results in more retention. So repeated engagement across time and context. And lastly, it's not a single capacity, nor is it fixed, right? So the more we do research, the more that we realize that not only is memory not just some container in the brain, it's spread over many mechanisms and many parts of mind and brain, right? All which serve different functions and goals that we might be accomplishing at any given time. So it makes a lot of sense to say, oh, well, it can't be the case that I just have a bad memory. We need to catch ourselves when we say that about ourselves. Oh, I have a bad memory. That can't be true because memory is not one thing, nor is it fixed. So I have a photo up here of a cover of a delightful book that came out some years ago, Moonwalking with Einstein. And if you've taken a look at this book, you know that the author of it is a journalist who engaged in these memory competitions. He got into this world of people who accomplish these incredible memory feats as a kind of a sport almost. And his core realization in this experience was this. He said, these people who have these incredible abilities to memorize, it's not that they're born with a special ability. It's all about technique. So improving memory techniques are learnable, they're teachable, and any of us can get better. So just to recap, anything that we bring into our classrooms or study techniques that we suggest to our students, it's hard to go wrong if we take these 5 principles into account. Memory is something the mind does, not a container in the mind. It thrives on effort and engagement. Without focus, it doesn't happen. Retrieval practice is the most powerful form of active engagement. Repeating engagement across time and context, distributing study time, that makes the time pay off, and it's not a single fixed capacity. Now, let's take on then this question of technology, though. So memory is now taking place in this technological environment. What does that mean? So one of the most powerful and important lines of research and powerful concepts that's come along in a long time is this idea of cognitive offloading. And this is definitely true for memory. So cognitive offloading is this great term. It means just what it sounds like, which is something that we could do with our own minds on our own. We delegate to a device, to a technology, right? So in the case of memory, it's pretty straightforward. Instead of committing a particular fact to memory, I'm just going to know where to find it. And here's the thing. When we do that, when we assume we can find it online, that decreases the likelihood we'll commit it to our own memory. And this is what the classic research studies on cognitive offloading and memory have revealed. And you can understand how this could have an undermining effect, right? So if I tell my students in, say, a research methods class, oh, it's okay, you can always look this up later if you need to, they're less likely to retain that fact. And over time, they're going to get less out of what they're trying to learn in that field. Now, here's a key thing, which is this doesn't mean that our ability to remember facts across the board in a global way has been degraded. I haven't seen any research that I would consider convincing on that score. So we can remember, but we'll choose not to in these selective situations if we've offloaded a technology. So that's a phenomenon teachers need to keep in mind. And of course, there's the attention connection. So big news flash, I'm sure, for everybody, is that our devices are incredibly distracting, right? And they're engineered to be. They're engineered to take our attention and pull it off to somebody else's purposes and away from our own. And if we're not attending, memory's not going to happen. So I think, for example, of students who are, say, off on a field trip that I've put together. Maybe we're visiting a historical site, or we're visiting an internship setting. And the students are going through this compelling experience, they're taking it all in, but then, oh, I want to take a picture, right? I bring out the phone. Now my attention is on setting up that photo and not on what I'm experiencing. And, oh, by the way, I have 47 new notifications on Instagram, and my mom just texted me. Maybe I should answer that. Nothing's going to be retained. So that, too, is something that our students need to be aware of, and maybe we need to set some structures around when we're in a high-stakes situation like a field trip. But here's the good news, is that educational technology, when it is designed to put those noble truths into action, can really accelerate what students can learn. And that's where I see the great potential of educational technology, when it's designed explicitly around the principles. And here's a few of my favorite examples I'll just share. So the first off is, believe it or not, Kahoot. So do we have any users of Kahoot in the house? Okay, this one is such a favorite. I even use this up to my graduate level courses. It does one thing and does it really well. It engages students in retrieval practice in a way that can be fun and fast-paced and very informative to me as the educator, because I can see right away, oh, okay, the students in this class are missing this particular set of questions. Let's revisit those. Now, even things like very basic techniques like flashcards, right? Flashcards for study, another great retrieval practice technique. Well, those now have great capabilities when they're transplanted into a digital form. And there's many of these around, but Brainscape is a relative newcomer to the scene. And what it does is it takes the flashcard and marries this with some new capabilities, such as the ability to put in your study materials and, using some AI, turn those into questions that you can then use to practice on the go every time you've got your phone with you in a few minutes, right? Distributing the practice, doing the retrieval, very, very powerful. I'm actually going through a self-learning course that I designed myself on my own in Brainscape right now. Duolingo, another example, explicitly designed around distributed practice and retrieval practice. Newsreel is another newcomer to the scene, and this one is just beginning to launch right now, but I did want to share it with you because it is described sometimes as Duolingo for news. This one is kind of US-oriented, but if you think about it, if you consume your news the way many of us do, you open your phone in the morning and you start to scroll. right? And you scroll and you scroll. It's overwhelming. At the end of it, you're anxious and you don't really know what you've absorbed from all of that. Well, newsreel boils down a day's current events into just the core ones, the key ones. So there's that selectivity, that back-of-the-hand knowledge theme again. And it engages the learner with those current event facts, with some retrieval practice, and then you're done for the day, right? So a completely different way to engage with that. And of course, there's the capabilities now with ChatGPT and generative AI. That's up next, so I'm not going to talk too much about those, but you can probably already see as well the potential for putting those 5 noble truths into practice in a variety of settings with a variety of approaches using those tools. Now, turning to the future of memory, a few future themes and trends that I wanted to highlight and get us thinking about as we enter into this conference. A few to watch is, I do think that we are going to see a continuation of this cognitive offloading and even sharing of memory theme that's been explored already. So our devices really are becoming extensions of our own minds and especially our own memories. And it is tempting, once again, to see this as negative, but I don't think that's necessarily accurate. So the first folks who talked about cognitive offloading and discovered how that worked in memory said, you know what, this is not really a new thing. If you think about it, we've always offloaded and shared our knowledge base and our own memories with external sources of all kinds. Of course, there's books, but there's also other people. So, for example, I've been married for 30 years, and I can attest that there are certain things that I remember and my husband remembers, and that way we sort of divide and conquer. And we're going to see people perhaps doing this more and more. Right? So devices as extensions of a long-standing trend in human memory to do more and to know more by sharing. And our life stories as well, what we would call autobiographical memory. We're seeing for the first time in human history a generation that has the ability to take their own fragmented and selective memories of what's happened to them in their lives and compare them against objective digital records and go back over time. Does that mean that they will have a richer life story and set of memories at the end of their lives? Will it mean that those memories are more accurate? We're not sure yet what the implications are, but this is definitely a shift. And this is a trend that I would like to see superimposed onto all of these, which is taking our memories into our own hands. Increasingly taking charge of what we choose to remember and what we choose to help other people remember. We can share, for example, with our students at every opportunity we can those 5 noble truths of memory, because research shows that when students have the opportunity to see those principles put into practice and see that they pay off in better results in less time, they will take those same techniques forward into their next class, into their next project, without me, the teacher, even having to goad them into doing so. And that is going to be powerful as well. And none of this, I believe, has to be a chore or a slog for any of us, right? So I talk in my second book, right towards the end, about a concept called memory play, what I called memory play. And maybe we'll see more people taking this kind of a playful approach. So whether it's through a friendly competition or just to test our own boundaries, I can do that as well. And if you think about it, just as in so many areas of learning, children start out playful in this way, right? So if you know any of those kids who they know all the dinosaurs, dozens and dozens of them, they've memorized the names, and they want to share that with you, or the kids who are excited to tell you all the plots of their favorite books that they've memorized as well, that's not a chore for them. That's a positive. And maybe we can all get back there, and maybe we can help our students get back there as well. So I guess for those of us who are leaders in this space, I would encourage us to really take to heart the idea that if we want to have an educated citizenry with sophisticated thinking abilities, if we do want to have the innovations and the creativity of the future, We need knowledge. And as educators, we need to be able to help our students acquire that. So I hope that your time at this conference is going to offer many springboards for finding out and thinking about what this is going to look like for your students in your courses. So thank you very much. I appreciate your attention.